Hello, good afternoon on day 75 of our 99 days. Um, Today I want to talk about resentment, as I was inspired by the quote I shared with you from Eckhart Tolle. And I was also inspired by private conversations or interactions I had via chat and in coach sessions with a few of you over the past days, weeks. And that kept me thinking actually why, what actually holds people in this cycle of feeling good, raising your frequency, and then you being pulled down again, or life feels still as a struggle, or and you know all the insights, you know your lack beliefs, you know actually how things are working now. So the mind understands it, but somehow it shows differently still in daily life. And I contemplated a lot on what actually is still holding us back, or is still actually literally imprisoning us with something within ourselves that still wants to hold on to something. So this is the first time I actually really prepared a session, and I've really written it out. To really give you a full, well, not full, but to give you a very structured way of going through this process and why it's happening, and to really grasp how deep you actually have to go to let go of your deepest pain. Otherwise, it keeps coming back again and again. So, so I want to start first with the baseline that I'm coming from. And like I shared before, it's not a solid truth. But it's a lesson, an insight I've learned myself by experience, and trying it out literally over the past years. But it's also a lesson that is being taught by all teachers actually all over the world. It doesn't really matter what the exact background is. Everybody's actually sharing the same thing in a way. And I've translated it in a very short sentence that life is a mirror. And you know what I mean with life is a mirror, but just to be sure here, for this context, if life is a mirror, then everything that is shown to you as happening to your life is an invitation to learn a lesson. And that, I think, will actually hardly ever stop. You will always be invited to for growth by life. Because I believe strongly that inherently we as humans, as conscious beings, there is an inner drive for survival, and that also means there's an inner drive for growth. We don't want to sit still all day and do nothing and not feel inspired. I mean, there's this inner curiosity within us to learn more, and growth is a result of learning things. And even people who are not interested in this field of consciousness, what we are sharing here in these 99 days, they still have also showed this desire for growth. I mean, everybody is thriving on compliments, on improving themselves, on doing the job better, playing the sports better. There's always this. It's not just for competition, not at all, but well, for if it is any competition, it's the competition with the self for growth. So this inherent drive for growth needs to be fed, actually. I mean, if you don't have a challenge, you can't grow. If there's not grow, if there's nothing to learn, then you can't grow. So if we go back to that simple sentence of life is a mirror, then you can literally take everything that's happening and doing something with you, whether it's a positive reaction or a negative reaction. It's showing you something, and how you react to it, that tells you where your growth is. So if you feel very aligned with something and very excited about something, then you can grow in a very positive way. You can learn more and increase your knowledge on things, or increase your experience on things. That's an easy one. We can all see that path of growth. And if life shows you friction, or you feel friction within yourself, or contraction, or tension, or frustration, or anger, or in whatever intensity it comes up, even if it's very light, very almost unnoticeable, but there's still like this little uncomfortability within yourself, then that's also an invitation for growth. What is shown here, why I'm not reacting neutral, why something is happening within me. So this inner alignment is needed as a base ground to grow from. Because if you don't have this inner alignment with the self, then what is actually your measurement? What is your, how can you know if something is in or out of alignment with yourself? You need to have some base point there. Otherwise, you cannot feel friction. You cannot feel contraction. So if you're in a neutral state, like, for instance, you probably have experienced this peacefulness in meditation, even was for a short moment, then there's actually always perfect in that moment, always in alignment. There's no high excitement. There's no pain to be felt. It just is. It's peaceful. It's neutral. And that base point even feels good. So but it's not the excitement like, oh, I really want to be curious and want to know more. It's just like, oh, it's absolutely great to be here. But we don't hold that point 24 hours a day. So when we go through life and through the motions of the day, we feel more up or more low towards this base ground. So you can see it as a ruler. This is like this balance point where the scale is in full balance, and then you go either out of balance. And how much you stretch yourself out of balance is whether you feel very low or very excited. And you probably experienced by now that neither one of the extremes is holding on for extreme long time, although we tend to have the lows holding on much longer. So apparently it's so that the good ones, the good vibes, the high frequency, are more difficult to keep high, because we're pulled back by the low ones, and the low ones actually can hold us, well, depending on our willingness for growth, hold us there for a long time. So this base ground, this inner drive for growth, and the fact that life is a mirror, automatically means that whatever you've experienced in life has shown you something. And whether you can understand why that has happened to you, why there was a reason why you had experienced something in your childhood, is not relevant in itself for releasing that pain. If you really want to know why that happened, then you keep holding on to that pain, because there might not be an explanation. And if there's any explanation, it can only be explained as, like that I shared in another session, like, well, there must be some kind of soul path, soul journey for you, why you started in that circumstances with these intense experiences when you were young. But for releasing the pain or healing our wounds, the why doesn't really matter. But are you able to see that there is a lesson being learned, or can be learned, from that experience? Because somehow all these experiences you have in life shape you. They have shaped you, and even if the pain is still there, it also has always brought you something positive, which is often hard to see, especially when the pains were really deep, and the wounds were really deep. But you've had the strength to survive that experience. It gave you a strength which apparently you can use in a positive way now. Otherwise, you would not have survived that experience. So, and apparently, there was this interaction with the other who caused that experience, because often there are other people involved in intense experiences in our lives. It's almost always related to circumstances and people. Apparently, you got caught up in this situation where, of course, you had to learn something, but the one who did it to you had to learn something as well. Is also going through his journey and his path in life. And why you cross lines, I don't know. But if you can see it from a higher perspective, that there's something to be learned there, then there is an openness for growth and there's an openness for healing. So if we have, I'm looking at my notes every now and then, so to really keep myself to this structure of how I share with you. So if you can see that life is really a path for growing and for learning, then there is an openness to also open up to yourself. And why do I keep holding onto something? What is it that I can't embrace fully yet? So I keep that pain actually alive. I keep that pain in my system. I keep that experience in my system. I hold on to something. So what a few of you who shared it with me are experience now, or in the past years as well, but it comes up now again, obviously, because you're so involved in deep in this process now, that you really go through ups and downs, cycles of feeling really good, and then all of a sudden you're like pushed back by life to a very lower vibration, and then this feeling of frustration and anger and being so fed up with this constant cycle of up and down, this roller coaster actually of going up and down, is so tiring. And it feels like you have looked at everything, and it feels like you know actually everything that's there. You know what needs to be healed. You know where you're stuck. You know your patterns. You know your programming. But still, it happens. And how can I get out of this cycle? How can I get out of these low vibes? And what's actually needed or what it actually tells you, if you still go into these deep lows, then there's still something that's not seen there, or there's something that you still want to hold on to. That's the only explanation I can come up with, because I experienced it myself. If I hadn't gone through something at its deepest level, it kept coming back. And every time it was actually the same. My base theme, as I share with you, for not being seen in situations, or not being seen by others, kept coming back again and again and again, and in all different shapes and forms, but it was always the same theme. And it was mostly always related to the same person or persons, but mostly in my case to the same person. So I just did not want to see, and that was not so much related to the person itself, but the theme was shown by that person most clearly and most painfully. So if you really want to connect, now what it actually says to me, as soon as I get into this low, deep vibe, so this where the frequency is very low and where it feels very dark and painful, and where I cannot see the opposite perspective on the situation, where I still want to feel that it needs to be solved outside myself, I was at that moment completely disconnected from my inner self. So I could not embrace anything because I was so disconnected from my inner self. There was this base ground I was explaining in the beginning. Or the heart. I just could not connect to it. So I was just really going into a very deep feeling of blame towards the situation that I experienced so often, and towards that person. I resented for something. So now I come to the theme of resentment. If you hold on to something, then there is resentment in that pain. You still put something outside yourself. You still put blame onto something else, and you resent that situation, that person, or even yourself for having made choices in your life. And you resent that what has happened. You resent it. And resentment is putting something outside yourself, and you expect the circumstance or the other person or the other you, actually, the identified you that has caused you that pain. You expect that to solve your problem because you expect that is actually what releases you. But the opposite is true. Only you, the true you, the courageous you, the one that really can open up with the heart, can release this pain, can embrace this painful experience by not doing actually the thing, but just being unconditionally there. So in fact, you have to take responsibility for everything that has ever happened to you, even if it was outside of your control, because ultimately you're the only one who can heal it. The other person who did something to you can help you in healing in that process, if that's possible. If you can communicate with that person, and that person will give you, or can heal with you together and acknowledge his role or her role in that process, then that's a better base point. But still, there's something there that you need to do yourself, even for also experiencing something that you had to go through this feeling of, but I had to go through this. Why did it happen to me? That is something you have to heal yourself. That's still resentment. Like if you have a sentence like, why did this happen to me? Or why can I not move this? Then there's resentment towards yourself. Then you have to turn it around and forgive yourself. And I've shared before on forgiveness. So to release resentment, to let go of resentment, to let go of this feeling of blaming others, and the only way to release that is to forgive. To forgive yourself, to forgive the other, to forgive the experience, to forgive the situation, to forgive the circumstance, to forgive the system, to forgive whatever it is. You have to forgive. And I know forgiveness is a difficult one to even open up to. Because forgiveness means that you have to take full responsibility that whatever that other person is doing with what happened, the one who actually caused the pain, it's outside of your control. So you have to take full control of the whole thing that happened. The fact that you were a victim, and that you have to heal it yourself, and that you have to open up to forgiveness, to that situation, even if you were the victim there. And that, of course, is for the mind who feels injustice being done, is a very difficult one. And that's the cycle you get in and out. And even if you hear me saying this and you think like, well, I know I've forgiven every person, then I have a next challenge. Can you worship that person? Can you be so grateful for learning that lesson, even if you don't have a clear idea on the lesson that has been learned because you were very young when it happened? But somehow it has shaped you. So somehow you had to go through that in life in order to be where you are right now, and to be this brave, courageous one you are right now, and go through this process of awakening. So can you now then worship and be grateful to that person or to yourself for showing you that lesson, for showing you that you had a base ground to grow from, for showing you that you were able to learn something and it has made you stronger, or has deepened you and have made you a person with a lot of experience. So you are like a more mature person now. I mean, a heavy backpack with a lot of shadow, as Jung calls it, with a lot of heavy experiences, also often, not also, shows people with a lot of strength and with a lot of wisdom. Because if you have not had all these different experiences, even the heavy ones, it's you can also not grow from a wisdom point of view. All these different experiences make you wiser. You can never relate to experience if you have not been through it yourself as well. So you're the expert here when something has bad happened, so you can relate to that experience, and if you've healed it, you can then help to others to heal, to go through that again for them. So you've become the expert with these heavy, intense experiences. You have grown in life. You have grown in wisdom. I cannot explain it differently. So that's the lesson you apparently had to learn, but also the wisdom you have gained, the experience you have gained. And that's why if you really can worship the other person, and I know there will be a lot of resistance when I say it. How can you worship someone who raped me? If that has happened to you, how can you worship that person? Well, if you can, it releases all the pain. And if you feel resistance, then go back to the reason why you want to wake up. Go back to the reason why you want to rise consciousness. Because there's a desire for liberation. There's a desire for letting go of that pain. So why can't you then be grateful to that person for that lesson? What is still then holding you? Where do you still feel, yeah, but there's injustice being done? You can never see that person as some person to be thankful for. But that person also has his or her journey. For me, it really helped to see that we all have our journeys. It softens a lot within me, because seeing that what that person has gone through, and how that person is trying to grow, and how that person is trying to learn, even if it's not in the way I would like to see it, I can still see their struggle, or his struggle or her struggle, whomever it is. So from a higher perspective, we're all learning, and sometimes it has to go through a harsh way, because apparently there is a blueprint underneath that created this. And then, of course, we are all part of a greater consciousness, and we are part of this strong, intense duality experiences here on Earth, of right and wrong, and good and bad, and better and worse. So this power, and domination and control, which is all over the world, has been there for decades, for aeons, for forever actually. And so we also carry that with us. So even the rapist has his or her background, why this has happened, and why this person has become that way. And the sad thing, you have become perhaps a victim of that situation, or you were the victim of not being seen or not being loved by persons you grew up with. And that seems extremely unfair. And you can keep digging into that why, but it won't release your pain. It will never give you a satisfied answer. Never ever, other than seeing the bigger perspective of life showing you that there's something to learn and something to experience always. So the exercise here is then, when you feel resentment coming up, oh no, let me rephrase that. Go through your experiences in life that were most intense to you and where you know that a lot of lax beliefs were created from. And if you have found that experience or more experiences, then who were the persons related to that? And go through the process then of forgiveness towards that person. And if you feel a lot of resistance, go back to the desire why you want to liberate yourself from this pain. Feel that this inner drive, now I want to release this pain, I want to release this pain. Then go back to that person again. Go through the process of forgiveness. Open up your heart. Try to see the bigger picture. Try to distance yourself a little from the fact that you were the victim, but try to see the big picture, like, well, there was apparently something to learn, and I have experienced it. It has shaped me. So, okay, I know that now. Now I can forgive. And I can be thankful and grateful for the lesson I learned. And then repeat this process until you feel that when you connect with your heart and in your mind to that experience and to that person, so not in physical contact, but it's just an inner process when I'm talking here, then you can feel that it gets lighter every time. I've done this process recently with a person close to me. And you can also do it so, like I did it with a person in my family, who I know that connection will be present in my life until either of us dies. So I know I had to really clear out everything that was still there, because that was the root cause of my pain. At least that's how I think I had that pain endured in my young life. And I noticed that it gets lighter and lighter and lighter. And every time when I'm confronted again with that same pain of not being seen, not feeling seen, then I go through that process again and again. And so much has shifted there. The resentment is gone. The forgiveness is there. Sometimes the worshiping is difficult. But then when I repeat this cycle, it gets easier and easier. And the fact actually of putting myself into this position of I have to worship that person, that actually was the breakthrough. When I thought, like, okay, if I can worship that person, really, really be grateful for the lesson learned, then that really opened my heart in a way. No, not in a way, it literally opened my heart. So forgiveness can also become by the mind another trick, actually, to think you have forgiven a person, but you haven't really. You have not really gone through everything. And worshiping is like really put someone out there and be literally bowing to that person, literally be grateful and thankful. And then that releases actually the connection of pain. So yeah, the core of this message is if something keeps coming back and you keep being pulled down by life, you put something outside of yourself and you're still blaming the circumstance or the past or the experience or the persons involved or the choices you made yourself. So there's also always forgiveness to self that needs to be looked at as well. Why wasn't I able to learn this lesson earlier? Was my frustration. I know this for so long. Why couldn't I have learned it 20 years ago? Because then it would have changed my life sooner, earlier, younger. Why did I have to wait so long to go through this process? Well, simply I didn't have the wisdom earlier to do this. So I can blame myself. But now I can see, no, there has been a reason why I had to go through this path. There is a reason why I had to experience all these different ways of dealing with the same thing. And apparently it has created now wisdom that I can share. So So be very, very honest here with yourself. If you really, really want to go through the deeper layers, then you have to go back through this process where you really deeply can forgive the other person from that deep inner alignment with your heart towards that other person. You cannot forgive with your mind. It comes from the heart. You can only, with unconditional love, forgive another person. You can only worship with unconditional love another person. It's not a mind thing. It's not a trick from the mind like, okay, I go through, or even the oh no, poo-poo, whatever. I keep forgetting that Hawaiian way of forgiveness. Someone shared a video, I think, on this in the group. So you can do that with the mind, and it feels like, okay, it feels lighter now. And then check yourself again and again and again, and every day, and repeat this for at least a few weeks. Repeat this process with that same person, or with, if it's towards yourself, with yourself. Have I forgiven myself? Have I forgiven myself? And repeat it again and again until you really feel it releases. It has released. And I can now being neutral to a person is not enough. You really, really must be compassionate and open and with love and care to that person. That's when you really you worship that person. It's not like you want to be with that person. You want to integrate that person in your life. It's not like that kind of caring. But there must be this compassion towards what has happened. So a longer session today, because I wanted to explain it carefully and clearly as well. I hope this helps. And nothing to add for now. And if there's any question or you want to share something with me personally, let me know or text me, and then I can react as well and see if I can give you another pointer. Okay, well, thanks for today. See you back tomorrow.